Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to talk about one of the most controversial hidden business models in disability services: sheltered workshops and piece rate disability labor. On the surface, this topic is presented as accommodation, support, and work opportunity. The opening slide even frames shelter work as a way to better assist employees with disabilities. That is the visible promise. But underneath that promise is a much deeper question. Is this truly opportunity, or is it a separate labor system where disabled workers are supervised, measured, and often paid far less than ordinary workers for repetitive production? This slide gets us into the actual labor. We see a man seated at a table, smiling as he handles small, repetitive parts. This is the kind of image people often use to defend the system. It shows focus, routine, purpose, and a sense of someone is being included in work. And that part may be real, but the hidden business model is not just giving someone something to do. It is about organizing disability labor into repetitive tasks that can be supervised, counted, and turned into productive output. This image deepens that point. A disabled worker is performing a narrow, repetitive packaging or assembling task. This is where the lane starts to separate itself from ordinary employment. The visible story is skill building. The hidden structure is controlled, segmented labor. The worker may experience the task as participation, but the organization may also be relying on that person for predictable piecework inside a setting built around supervision instead of ordinary labor market equalities. Here we see another worker engaged in repetitive task based production at a workstation. That matters because the more one of these scenes we see, the clearer the system becomes. This is not random activity, it is production. Tables, bins, boxes, scales, and stations all signal that the workshop is functioning like a labor site, even if the public language around it emphasizes therapy, rehabilitation, or purpose. The visible product is work opportunity. The hidden business is managed output. This slide shows another worker doing concentrated, repetitive bench work. This image matters because it reveals the narrowness of much workshop labor. It is often highly segmented and task specific, not broad skill development. That raises one of the biggest questions in this whole topic. Is this work actually opening a path to ordinary employment, or is it keeping the worker inside a controlled labor environment where advancement is severely limited? This image is especially powerful and potent because it shows a more isolated room with workers seated apart doing specialized repetitive tasks. The environment looks controlled, sterile, and separate. This is where the policy and moral tension becomes very clear. Shelter workshops are not just about labor, they are about segregation. The visible story is that the setting is safer and more manageable. The hidden reality is that when work is happening in a separate world, apart from the ordinary labor market. Now, this text slicks from workers to supervision. A person with a clipboard is overseeing the process. That is important because shelter work systems do not only rely on labor, they rely on measurement, monitoring, and control. The worker is not simply employed, the worker is being managed inside a structured disability labor environment. The visible role of the supervisor is support, the hidden role is productivity, oversight, and assurance. This slide broadens that point into a larger floor view. Several workers are performing similar tasks while a supervisor stands and watches over the room. That image reveals the business model in full. This is not one person receiving individualized support. This is a labor system with stations, output, workflow, and oversight. The visible story is structured opportunity. The hidden business is controlled production, floor shaped around disability. This continues the oversight theme. A worker is handling a task while another layer of production checking is implied. This is important because it shows that shoulder workshops can function like any production environment when it comes to standards and output, even though the workers may be paid and valued very differently. That is one of the deepest contradictions in this topic. The labor may be real, the expectations may be real, but the rewards may not be equal. This slide is where the emotional contradiction becomes stronger. We see a worker engaged, focused, and present. It reminds us that the workers themselves are not abstract symbols in a policy debate. They are people who may genuinely value routine, purpose, and social participation. That is why this lane is so complicated. Critics are not saying the worker's dignity is fake. They are saying the system may take that dignity and still place it inside a labor structure that pays pennies and offers limited advancements. This image strengthens that point. A worker looks directly at the camera with a sense of recognition, participation, and pride. The visible truth here is important. People often do take pride in their work, even inside unequal systems. That is what makes reform difficult. You cannot simply dismiss the structure if it is giving some people meaningful routine, but the hidden question remains whether meaning is based used to justify separate and unequal labor. This slide brings the contradiction into words. The speech bubble says the state may call himself employment first, yet the worker's still making pennies an hour. That is the whole issue in one image. The public language may celebrate inclusion, but the wage reality tells another story. This is where the hidden business model becomes unmistakable. The world looks real, the production is real, the attendance is real, but the pay can be treated as something different from ordinary labor. This image changes the energy of the deck. Now we see advocates and clients standing together with shirts emphasizing voice and rights. That matters because shelter workshops are not just a service model, they are a political background. Workers, self advocates, and disability rights supporters are increasingly challenging the idea that disabled adults should be kept in separate labor systems with different wage rules. The visible image is advocacy. The hidden shift is managed labor to organize resistance. This slide takes that advocacy into policy. This image explicitly references Disability Rights Florida, explaining an end to sheltered work. That shows that this is not just theoretical or historical. The model is being challenged, restricted, and in some places dismantled. This is what makes this topic such a current event. The country is still deciding whether support and supervision justify a separate labor structure or whether disability employment should move towards equal wages and integrated settings. This image is a powerful turning point. A young woman in a wheelchair is working independently, focused, and determined. She represents an alternative vision of disability and work, one that is not built around segregation, repetitive bench tasks, or subminimal assumptions. The visible image is ambition. The hidden message is that disability does not automatically mean a person belongs in a sheltered labor environment. This slide continues that alternative. Here we see a woman working independently in what feels more like a regular production environment. The point is not that every shelter worker can instantly transition into open employment. The point is that the real alternative exists when systems invest in support, integration, and ordinary labor market participation instead of defaulting to workshops. This image strengthens the case for ordinary work. A woman is seated at her station doing focused, self directed work. The visual difference from earlier slides is important. This feels less like mass workshop and more like an individual worker in a real task environment. That contrast helps you understand the hidden question when it becomes, are sheltered workshops truly the best we could do, or are they often the easiest institutional answer? This is especially important because we see a man outside doing cleanup work. Now, here we are, clearly beyond the workshop table. This represents integration into the ordinary working world where work happens in public, in community, in closed environments outside the segregated floor. This visible image is simple outdoor work. The hidden meaning is huge. Labor outside the workshop carries a very different kind of dignity and visibility. This slide brings us back into the shelter workshop itself with multiple workers seated at tables doing repetitive piecework. Returning here after the independent work slides is very effective. It lets the viewer feels the contrast. The workshop is orderly, structured, and clearly productive, but it feels confined, segmented, and limited. That is the central conflict of this whole topic. The model can offer routine and safety, but it can also trap people inside a separate labor world. This final image closes this deck by returning to the scale of the workshop and the close up of repetitive production. It reminds us that this controversy is not abstract. These are real hands, real tasks, real facilities, and real people. The work is happening. The question is what kind of work system this really is. Is it opportunity or is it a hidden business model built on low paid, supervised disability labor with little promise of real advancement? That is the question this presentation leaves with the audience. Thank you.